All right, we are live, and I'm just monitoring here on our Facebook page, and I believe we are also streaming to lightofinfinite.com, the festival website. And it is great to be with you on a Tuesday evening while we're waiting for people to find the live feed. Before I tell you the two stories I'm going to be sharing today, I thought I would share a little bit about myself for the people who haven't met me before and are meeting me via Light of Infinite Festival. My name is Salvador Litvak. I'm known on social media as the Accidental Talmudist. And my journey was colorful and accidental, to be sure. I was born in Chile. I came to the United States when I was 5. I grew up in New York. I'm a movie director by profession, and I certainly never expected to be sharing Torah every day with a million people via our platform, accidentaltalmudist.org. And the way that happened is we were conservative Jews in New York. We didn't go to temple very often. I went to Hebrew school. I had my bar mitzvah. And after that, I was very disconnected from Judaism, from Yiddishkeit. In college, I took a course called The Bible as Literature, encountered all kinds of challenging stories that they most certainly did not teach us in Hebrew school. But I really had no one to discuss it with. I didn't have a rabbi in my life, which was a shame at that time. But I had questions and I was curious. And over the years, I went to law school before I went to film school. I came out here to LA. And I kind of kept getting more curious. Out here, I met my wife, Nina. We're partners in everything we do. We're screenwriting partners in the movie business, and we run Accidental Talmudist together. And she also grew up. The only Judaism she had in her life was no Christmas tree in the house, as she likes to say. But we had all these questions, and we were wondering. We were open to it. Had a very powerful experience when my grandmother died. She was a Holocaust survivor, and it was powerful. And at that point, I really became curious about our tradition and started learning with various rabbis here in LA. And sooner or later, every rabbi you learn with will mention the Talmud, usually sooner. And I was just really curious. The Talmud seemed to be full of wisdom, and I wanted to know more about it. What is the Talmud? And how do you access this wisdom? But when I would go to the Jewish bookstore here in LA and saw the Talmud, and that it looked to me, you can tell what generation I'm from, it looked like 3 Encyclopedia Britannicas, 73 volumes in the Art Scroll Talmud. It just seemed too vast, too big, too intimidating. I didn't go to yeshiva. I didn't have a proper Jewish education, so I guess not for me in this lifetime. And repeatedly, when I went to that bookstore to get a book or a Judaic gift or something, I would look at those volumes, think, yeah, I'd like to read the Talmud, but who could enter that? Impenetrable. Probably happened a dozen times. And then in 2005, I was in the store, had that same thought process, started to walk away. And something stopped me, and I said, this is ridiculous. They're just books. There must be a book 1 of the Talmud. I'll get that, see what it's like. Figured out that book 1 of the Talmud is brachas, blessings. Found that volume, took it to the counter, and the kid at the register said, oh, you're doing Daf Yomi. I said, what's Daf Yomi? And he looked at me like this. And I thought, man, Daf Yomi must be a code. If you don't know the code, you're not allowed to read the book. Maybe it's only rabbis who can read the Talmud. I don't know. He's not going to embarrass me, but he's got to get rid of me. This is so awkward. And he said, his name was Zach Plotzker. Zach said, Daf Yomi is a program where people around the world read the entire Talmud 1 page a day on the same schedule. It takes 7.5 years. And today is day 1. So by accident, I happened to buy book 1 of the Talmud on day 1 of a 7.5 year cycle. I said, okay, God, I get the message. I'm going to do Daf Yomi. A lot of people start Daf Yomi. they all went to yeshiva. They weren't people like me. And most of them don't finish. It's a huge commitment, an hour a day, every day, for 7.5 years. But I felt like God put the book in my hands, gave me the mission, and I stayed with it. In 2012, I did what's called Completing Shas. And then I started blogging and writing about this beautiful fountain of wisdom, which is our tradition. And completely against all odds, and a huge surprise to us, this thing took off, particularly on Facebook. And now Nina and I have this worldwide audience in 70 countries, 1 million people. We share Jewish wisdom every day. I teach the Talmud every day. If you'd like to learn more, check us out at accidentaltalmudist.org. That's by way of introduction. So now I'd like to share with you 2 stories that I've always found very moving and that I feel I have a personal connection with. I would say that at this point in our journey, we're from Yids. I mean, we're Orthodox Jews. And of what particular variety, for a long time it was hard to say. I daven Sfard, which means kind of in a Hasidic mindset, which is always funny to people because my last name is Litvak. And Litvaks and Hasidim are sort of opposites. The Litvaks are the very intellectual ones. The Hasidim are the more emotional ones. I definitely balance these 2 poles out. But the stories I'm going to tell you today are both Hasidic stories that took place in Ukraine. And while it certainly hasn't been possible the last few years because of COVID, and seems unlikely that it'll be possible this year, to go to Uman in Ukraine. Uman is the final resting place of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. And there's a huge gathering of Jewish men on Rosh Hashanah every year in Uman, Ukraine. The last few years it's been getting 80,000 guys. Some people call it the Jewish Burning Man. I went for the first time in 2017 and again in 2018. And the stories I'm going to tell you today involve Rebbes whose final resting places, their keverim, right, their graves, which is a place that people go to pray. We don't pray to a holy man, a tzaddik, but we pray to God at their grave sides because it's a powerful place. There's a powerful energy there. The tzaddik, the righteous one who passed on, sort of invigorates our prayers and really helps us prioritize our own lives, what's going on. We achieve some clarity there, and it makes it clear for us what to pray for when we're praying at those places. All right, the first story that I'm going to share with you is a story about Reb Baruch and Rebbe Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev, the Berditchever Rebbe and Reb Baruch of Medjugorje. So actually I have some pictures here and I will try to set this up to share. Here we go. And hopefully you're going to be seeing that momentarily. It doesn't seem to be there it is. Okay, so what you're seeing there, and I will move over a little bit, right? So it's not blocking me. Wait a minute. Let me see. So if I go like that, it's going to be a little better. Okay, so this is the final resting place of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, and his grandson Reb Baruch, who was a Rebbe in Medjugorje. This is in Medjugorje, Ukraine. So back when these Hasidic masters were active rabbis with communities, Reb Baruch held court in Medjugorje, right, the sort of rabbinic court of his grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, and Rabbi Levi Yitzhak was in Berditchev, right? It's a fairly easy drive now. Then it was probably a multi-day journey by wagon. And they were very different style rabbis. Levi Yitzhak was known as a great advocate of the Jewish people, tremendous energy, tremendous spirit, and, likely to get up and dance at any moment in time. He's just, he was so filled with love of God and love of his fellow Jews. He was just ready to sing and dance at any moment. Reb Baruch Very stately man, very courtly man. And his Shabbos table was really like a table for kings, beautiful china, beautiful lights and candles and everything. Whereas Levi Yitzhak in Berdichev, his table was more of a mess. Both places, beautiful Torah was taught, beautiful songs were sung, but very different style. And in much the same way as, I as a movie director get to work with every other type of, person in the crew, producers, actors, cinematographers, costume designers. Who I don't get to work with is other directors, right? I don't really get to see other directors working. There's only one director on a movie set, generally speaking. So Levi Yitzhak really wanted to spend Shabbos by Reb Baruch, and sort of see how, and just be a guest there and enjoy a Shabbos run by a different Rebbe. Reb Baruch knew Levi Yitzhak's reputation and his boisterousness, and it's just such a different style. He just kept putting him off. Yeah, you have beautiful Shabbos in your town. We have beautiful Shabbos in my town. It's fine. But Levi Yitzhak kept insisting. And finally, Levi Yitzhak said, listen, I understand that it's a very different style by you. I really just want to experience it. I will come. I'll stand in the back of the room. I'll keep my mouth shut. I won't draw any attention to myself. The only thing I will say out loud is Amen when you say a prayer or a blessing. And under those conditions, Reb Baruch agreed. So Levi Yitzhak shows up for a Shabbos by Reb Baruch, and they have beautiful Friday night prayers. Levi Yitzhak is so high, such a beautiful spirituality there. Then they go to that Shabbos table, that stately, beautiful, king-like, princely Shabbos table. And Reb Baruch's table was so civilized that he had sort of a young disciple walk around with a big tray with two kinds of fish. Because everyone knows it's a very deep Hasidic question. By your Friday night table, do you have the sweet fish first or the sour fish first? Like you sort of strengthen yourself to the sour fish and then get the reward of the sweet fish, or you warm up with the sweet fish and then get into the sour fish. And so he let people have a choice which one they wanted to have first. So the young man with the tray came by Reb Levi Yitzhak's place and said, does the master enjoy sweet fish, or does the master like sweet fish or sour fish? And Levi Yitzhak, who, had just been bursting with so many Torah ideas that he would have liked to say, that he would have shared with people around him as he is wont to do, but was living up to his agreement to keep his mouth shut. But now that he's asked a direct question, before he could even think about what his answer should be, said, do I like sweet fish? I love sweet fish. I love sour fish. I love everything that the master of the universe puts before us. And in his I love everything, his arms shot up like this, and that tray covered with plates of fish and goopy sauce, etc., got pushed up in the air, and now in slow motion, my pals, imagine this big chunk of fish and goopy fish sauce arcing through the air, turning over and over, and landing on the shoulder, on the tallis, the prayer shawl, which the Rebbes would wear by their Friday night table, of Reb Baruch, the stately and elegant Reb Baruch. There must have been 20 or 30 people at the Shabbos table. They all turned in absolute shock. How would Reb Baruch react? Surely he would, scream at this guest to get out. What did Reb Baruch do? He looked at the fish. He brushed it off his shoulder. And he continued having a conversation about some Torah subject with his neighbor at the table. And everyone understood that the way this was going to be handled is as if it had never happened, because nobody is going to embarrass a guest at Reb Baruch's table, certainly not Reb Baruch. Levi Yitzhak, of course, was very grateful that the moment just passed and nobody made a big deal. And eventually he had a beautiful Shabbos by Reb Baruch. He apologized profusely, of course, but it was not any kind of an incident. And after Shabbos ended, he went on his way back to Berdichev. The next Shabbos, Reb Baruch came wearing his tallis at the Shabbos table, and the fishy goop stain was still on it. And his students were surprised. You know, he's so elegant. Everything is so perfect, clean, pristine, that he still has that stained tallis. You would have they would have thought he had it cleaned. And the week after that, and the week after that. And by the fourth week, the students said, Reb Baruch, we're curious. We understand why you didn't want to embarrass the Rebbe from the Berdichever Rebbe when he was here. But now that he's been gone a few weeks, why are you still wearing the fishy goop stained tallis? And Reb Baruch said, this stain was caused by the love of a precious soul for his creator. Such a precious soul. It's all love in this stain of a Jew for God, and I will never have this tallis washed. And indeed, he wore that tallis for the rest of his life, and when he left this world, it passed on to the next Rebbe, and the next Rebbe after that. After a few generations, that tallis was so threadbare that it couldn't be worn on Shabbos anymore, and they only brought it out for one moment a year, the Ne'ilah service at the conclusion of Yom Kippur, where in a sense we're at our highest spiritual peak at that moment. And it was such a tradition, such an important one. Eventually, that tallis passed into the hands of the Munkacher Rebbe in the early 20th century, and he saw what was coming with the Nazis and the Holocaust and the fires that would consume so many Jews in that tragedy. And he asked that this tallis not be lost, that he should be buried in it as a burial shroud, and that's where it went. But this beautiful tradition, right, of a man who not only would not embarrass his friend, but who took his accident, his mishap, because it was so beautifully motivated by love of God as a precious symbol of that love, and gave it great honor at his table, is one well worth remembering. Here we see again the burial place of the Munkach of Reb Baruch and the Baal Shem Tov, and here is the burial place of Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev, which I visited with my good friend Moshe Storch, who's a phenomenal singer. There's a Berdichever Nigun, a special melody associated with the Berdichever Rebbe, and we sang it that night by his grave, which we reached literally in the middle of the night during this trip, leaving Uman and going to the airport and visiting various gravesides of tzaddikim, of righteous souls. Very, very special night I'll never forget. So on that same trip, we also visited Breslov. Okay, so Breslov is where Rebbe Nachman of Breslov is from. He ended up being buried in Uman by his choice, but he was from Breslov. He died quite young, and Rebbe Nachman has become very influential through his writings. A beautiful teaching of Rebbe Nachman is that every Jew, every person should talk to God the way you would talk to a close friend who loves you, who cares about you, and who's really interested in your problems. There's nothing you can't say to God, and you shouldn't feel that the only correct mode for talking to God is prayer and formality. You should talk to God like your good friend, and you should make a regular practice of doing that every day. That's a teaching of Rebbe Nachman. That teaching and many others were collected and passed down to us through the efforts of Reb Nosson. Right, so the primary disciple of Rebbe Nachman was Reb Nosson, known as Reb Nosson of Breslov. And here, in this picture here, Moshe and I are in a graveyard in Breslov, and that is where I don't have the picture right there, but where Reb Nosson is buried. What was curious and unexpected is that, sorry. I have to do it like that. Wait a minute. What's going on here? So that's okay. So that's the graveside of the Berdichever Rebbe, and that is Breslov right there, the graveyard in Breslov, where Moshe and I are kind of dancing in the graveyard, and that's where Reb Nosson is buried. Now, when I told my father that I was going to Uman, to Ukraine, to the old country, he said, well, that's where we're from. And I said, well, I know, right? My great-grandfather, my father's grandfather, who emigrated from the old country to Chile, and that's where my grandfather, my father, and I were born in Chile. But we come from Ukraine. My great-grandfather came from Ukraine, and I had always heard that he came from Odessa. My father said, Odessa, yes, that's where he departed from. But where we're actually from is a little shtetl called Chichelnitsky, which is now known as Chichelnik in the Ukrainian language. So Chichelnik is not like Uman. Uman, once a year, there's a huge infrastructure to welcome these 80,000 Jews who come to celebrate Rosh Hashanah by Rebbe Nachman. Chichelnik, no one goes there. And so the only thing we could find was a Jewish cemetery, which had been desecrated many times by the anti-Semites. There's many Ukrainian anti-Semites in the history of Ukraine. In fact, the reason that Rebbe Nachman is buried in Uman is because it was a terrible pogrom that killed tens of thousands of people, and he wanted to be close to those souls to help them, reach the world to come. But at any rate, so this Jewish cemetery in Chichelnik, we found it. Most of the stones were broken or toppled. Now let me see. So here's a gravestone in that graveyard in Chichelnik. Here we found in the more modern part of the cemetery, Yosef Litvak. So for sure, these were my ancestors who were there. That inscription, if you could read it, it's Hebrew letters and sort of Yiddish writing. That's Yosef Litvak. And this is that cemetery in Chichelnik. And as you can see, there's a little building off to the side. So we were kind of meditating in that cemetery for a couple hours and thinking that little building off to the side was like where they store the lawnmowers or something. But later on the way, we were kind of on our way out, we said, wait a minute, let's just walk by that building. And we saw there was a phone number on it and some writing in Hebrew. It's like a sort of Jewish cemetery society in Ukraine, and you could call a number, and a local would come and open the door. And when we walked in, we discovered that it was a kever. It was a burial place of this guy, Moshe Tzvi, the Savroner Rebbe. Now, at that moment that we were in there, we didn't know who the Savroner Rebbe was. But when we eventually made it to the airport, I was reading a book called Through Water and Fire, which was a biography written by Chaim Kramer of Reb Nosson of Breslov. And when you read that story, you learn who the Savroner Rebbe was. And this story will make you quake in your boots. So I know our time is somewhat limited. I'll tell it quickly. The Savroner Rebbe was an enemy of Reb Nosson of Breslov. He thought that these followers, and it was a very small group at this point, but the followers of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov and his teachings, which were being promulgated by Reb Nosson of Breslov, according to the Savroner Rebbe, this was a kind of radical Judaism that will subvert Judaism, is unhealthy for the Jews, and it needs to be squashed. And so the Savroner passed all kinds of edicts, sort of outlawing people to do business with Breslovers, even saying you can punch a Breslover. And he just wanted to get rid of them and discourage them in any way. And since they were still picking up new followers, he finally said, extreme measures must be taken. And what's he going to do? He's going to collect a lot of money from his followers. Now, the Savroner Rebbe had thousands of followers. Rebbe Nachman had like 100 followers gathered around from a few different towns, sort of like reading his works as they were being published by Reb Nosson of Breslov. But the Savroner, with collecting money from his thousands of followers, to give a bribe to the regional governor, right, a Russian governor, to have all these Breslovers shipped out to Siberia, to just get rid of them once and for all. He was on his way to the regional capital to bribe this governor. Word of this plot got to Reb Nosson, that, the Savrunner is very organized and with a lot of money, going to bribe the governor to get rid of us. What did Reb Nosson do? He started praying so intensely that it's like he went into a trance for an hour. And when he came out of it, he said, the Savrunner will not reach the capital in time. Cut to, the Savrunner and a few of his followers are in a wagon on their way to the capital. It's a sunny day. It's Wednesday. They're going to get there by Thursday and spend Shabbos in the capital. Freak storm. Suddenly the clouds gather above them. Pouring rain makes the roads absolutely mud baths, impassable. And they end up having to take shelter in just a little town on the way to the capital with a small Jewish community. This community is thrilled to have for Shabbos as their guest the prominent Savrunner Rebbe. They're thrilled to have him. They do him a lot of honor. And they have a very nice Shabbos with him and his followers. And then come Saturday afternoon, they say to him, God sent you here. It's no coincidence that you ended up here on this Shabbos. We have a terrible problem in this area. There is a Jew who's a drunk and who gets his drinking money by ratting out families who are hiding their sons from conscription into the Tsar's army. Back then, if you got taken into the Tsar's army, it was a 25-year hitch. And when you're in that army, there's no kosher food, there's no wearing tzitzis and tefillin, there's no Jewish life possible. For these observant Jews in that time, having their boys taken into the Tsar's army is almost like a death sentence. And so families would hide their boys. And this drunk informer, just to get drinking money, who would tell the Cossacks where these families were hiding boys, it was it was terrible. This is a death penalty offense for the Jewish people to be an informer like that. And they only had 2 rabbis in this town, and they had actually issued an edict of death upon this informer. But you need 3 rabbis to issue such an order of death. And by the way, a beis din, a rabbinic court in modern times, and by modern times I mean in the last 1,000 years, yet never issues a death sentence. But this was a life or death situation. And now that the Savrunner had suddenly come to town, this thing that they were thinking about doing, to them it seemed like divine providence. Now he will join in their edict, and they will just actually execute that informer. The Savrunner, who knows what's what, and obviously has a relationship with government officials, is like, I'm not going to participate in the death sentence of an informer for the Cossacks, for the Tsar's army. And they say, well, we know why you're going to the capital is to bribe the governor to get rid of the Breslovers. We don't care about the Breslovers. We really care about protecting the families in this area. And we'll give you a lot more money, okay? So you'll have the double bribe, and for sure you can get rid of those Breslovers. And the Savrunner's hatred of the Breslovers was so intense that he said, all right, we should make sure we have enough money that bribe will work. So he joined in issuing that death sentence. As soon as Shabbos ended, they went and picked up that guy, told him the Savrunner Rebbe wants to meet you. And he's like, wants to meet me? Oh, do you want to meet me? And they said, come. And they took him past the bathhouse, which after Shabbos, they got the furnace underneath the bathhouse piping hot. And as they walked past it, they threw this informer into the furnace. He was killed instantly, and the body, burnt up and gone. The Savrunner is on his way to the capital with his followers. Now, he was supposed to get there for that meeting, on Thursday to meet the governor. Now he arrives on Sunday. He can't get the meeting on Monday like he'd like. It takes until Wednesday of the following week. Finally comes in to see the governor with his bundle of money to issue this bribe. As soon as he enters the room, the governor says, I know why you're here. He says, oh, okay. And I know what you did on the way here. and that you got rid of one of the Tsar's most important informers, and that man is dead. And the only reason I'm not issuing a death sentence on you is because you got that bundle of money right there, which is now my money. The governor took the money. He said, I'm not issuing a death sentence on you, but the Tsar will. You better disappear. And if you're ever seen in this part of the country again, you're dead. The Savrunner Rebbe, who had gone there to get rid of the Breslovers, ended up in hiding himself. Where? In a little town called Chichelnitsky. And there are 3 generations of Savrunner Rebbes in that kever, in that burial place, in that cemetery, where you see me standing there. And eventually the 4th Savrunner Rebbe would make Aliyah and move to Israel. And today, actually, the present Savrunner Rebbe and the Breslov community are good friends. But isn't it amazing that the Savrunner who sought to get rid of Rebbe Nachman and have his teachings erased from this world, Rebbe Nachman got 80,000 visitors that year in Uman, and the Savrunner, who were his visitors? Me, Moshe Storch, and 2 of our friends, 4 guys who happened to go there just looking for the hometown of my family, the Litvaks. And who knows, perhaps my ancestors were disciples of the Savrunner Rebbe. I don't know. It's possible. But what a tale. What a dramatic tale of the Savrunner Rebbe, Reb Nosson of Breslov. And that's our second story we told. If you joined us late, I first told a story about Reb Baruch and Levi Yitzhak, the Berdichever Rebbe. I think that ends our time together. I hope you enjoyed these 2 tales. If you'd like to learn more from us, we're always sharing beautiful, beautiful pearls from the Jewish tradition at accidentaltalmudist.org and our Facebook page, Accidental Talmudist, as well. May you be blessed with Shavuos coming. Today is actually the new month of Sivan, so a Chodesh Tov to you. A good Shabbos a little early, and then Saturday night we celebrate Shavuos, the greatest day in human history, when we celebrate the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai. May you be blessed in all your ways. All the best.